How much of U.S. is spent on military? Focusing on quality over quantity in the U.S. military budget. With Congress's bipartisan support, the U.S. administration has recently succeeded in significantly raising defense expenditures. The estimated $877.0 billion national military budget for 2023. As of this writing in November 2019, Congress has not yet approved the final budget, is significantly more than either the $575 billion average throughout the Cold War or the slightly over $600 billion budget from President Obama's previous term. We believe the Pentagon can use these monies effectively, especially after 2 decades of war, a decade of Washington financial irregularities, and nearly 10 years of slow top-line decrease. Sensibly, former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis' National Defense Strategy called for the Department of Defense to manage the current Middle East wars, as well as the possibility of a near-term crisis on the Korean Peninsula, while also reviving its capabilities vis-a-vis China and Russia, including addressing dangerous vulnerabilities in cyberspace and outer space. That is a really difficult list of tasks. Although we are certain the Pentagon can effectively utilize a $750 billion national defense budget in 2020, we have serious concerns about whether it will. Every service keeps demanding greater force structure. The Navy wants more ships, the Air Force wants more tactical aircraft squadrons, and the Army wants more soldiers. Although there is a need for expansion in certain critical areas like precision-guided munitions, cyber and space resiliency, and unmanned systems, expanding the force overall is counterproductive when the policy is aimed at China and Russia. The financial predicament of the country, with a federal budget deficit of about $1 trillion in 2019, confirms the belief that real defense spending will not increase further and may even decline, as shown by the Trump administration's budget predictions for 2021 and beyond. Tough decisions are therefore also required. Context: how much is the U.S. spending on defense? First, it's necessary to have a broad viewpoint. How much money does America spend on the military today? The way this question is answered establishes the political and financial framework for in-depth discussions about modernization, strategy, and force structure. By some standards, the current national defense budget of the United States is substantial. In 2020 dollars, it surpasses the average of the Cold War for the United States, which was a little over $500 billion. The U.S. national defense budget accounts for nearly 40% of global military spending. It excludes funding for the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Homeland Security, but includes funding for the Department of Energy's nuclear weapons program, most intelligence accounts, and war costs. This means that even in the face of China's rise and Russia's revanchism, the Western alliance system controls the lion's share of the world's military might. America's allies and close friends make up another third or so of the total. Additionally, several portions of the defense budget are comparatively sound. For the most part, military specializations pay highly compared to civilian occupations needing similar training and experience. The annual budget for purchasing weapons surpasses $100 billion. The era of the so-called procurement holiday that occurred in the 1990s and early 2000s has long since ended. Budgets for research and development are likewise substantial in 2019. Training budgets are commensurate with force size, comparable to levels seen during the Reagan administration in terms of flying time, steaming days, large-scale ground training, and other essential operations. Budgets for maintenance are no different. More often than not, insufficient resources have been the cause of the latter account's volatility and delays in recent years. However, American defense spending is neither excessive nor unaffordable. It has decreased to roughly 3.5% of GDP, about the size of the economy from almost 5% in the late George W. Bush and early Obama administrations. Comparatively speaking, it ranged from approximately 5 to 10% of GDP during the Cold War. The U.S. military of today is also not very large. Its 1.3 million uniformed active duty members are much less than the force that surpassed 2 million in its later decades during the Cold War. It is thus not much larger than the armed forces of North Korea or India, nor is it larger than that of China. To put it briefly, it is a moderately expensive but cheap military that depends on maintaining a qualitative advantage over opponents to keep up its fighting power and defend American interests across the world. As President Obama pointed out in his 2016 State of the Union address, U.S. military spending may very well be approximately equivalent to the combined spending of the next 8 highest-spending nations. However, defense funds don't necessarily guarantee successful deterrence or control the course of battle. Asymmetric and disproportionate impacts could be caused by Chinese precision missiles, Russian advanced air defenses, cyber attacks, advanced submarines, anti-satellite weapons, and other such capabilities, whether they are operated by Beijing and Moscow or supplied to other parties. While new technology present opportunities for the U.S. military, they also give enemies new means of undermining or harming the U.S. Therefore, funding must be sufficient for the Department of Defense to pursue a qualitative military edge over possible opponents through a comprehensive modernization program that is well-directed. Yes, the United States spends a lot on the military. It has decreased from being nearly 10 times as great at the beginning of the century to about 3 times that of China, the second largest military power in the world. That could seem like a convenient benefit. It is incorrect, particularly because the United States military's proper strategic objective should be to discourage China and Russia in the first place by being able to deny the goals of any aggression and impose unacceptable costs, rather than beat them in a fight. China now has sophisticated weaponry, including the DF-21 and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles with homing warheads, other options for precision strikes against American and Allied bases in the area, stealthy submarines that could approach U.S. 7th Fleet ships covertly, and formidable threats against American cyber, space, and communication systems that have historically given the United States unabated asymmetric advantages. All of these things are the result of military modernization and reform efforts this century. While Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania together only have a combined military strength of about 30,000, and the United States and other NATO allies only have about 5,000 troops in the area during normal peacetime, Russia, on the other hand, can quickly move up to several 100,000 forces within its borders, posing a threat to those 3 NATO members. Finally, one may wonder if the Department of Defense, a federal organization that cannot even audit its spending, isn't so wasteful that it can maintain or perhaps increase its combat capabilities with a lot less money. While it is true that the DoD is inefficient, a large portion of waste is ingrained in the organization and is challenging to remove without careful patient work, lest it compromise vital combat capabilities. The military healthcare system, for instance, is arguably excessively big and costly. However, one of the most important military benefits that aids in luring and keeping such a superior, all-volunteer army is access to first-rate healthcare. Furthermore, once put into effect, the majority of healthcare reform plans would only save a few $billions annually, significant savings, but insignificant in comparison to the magnitude of the country's entire military budget and defense requirements. The way forward is to prioritize quality over quantity, modernization over force structure and size, and readiness over both. Thankfully, Pentagon personnel have a lodestar to guide them through their challenging work, one that aligns, we believe, with both the strategic needs of the country and MADA's top goals. To put it plainly, none of the services should aim to greatly expand the strength of the military. Rather, the current forces unit-by-unit preparedness and longer-term innovation and modernization should be prioritized. The Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and military agencies already have everything thanks to fast-growing resources, which is the one major problem with much-needed increases in defense spending. The services budgets do not yet reflect MADA's strategic vision's focus and clarity. More important issues of military innovation and readiness restoration following 2 decades of war and a decade of bipartisan budgetary gridlock in Washington have been layered with demands for a larger force. The Army now aims to increase the number of soldiers on active duty from approximately 480,000 to at least 500,000. The Navy intends to grow its fleet from about 285 ships to 355, albeit that objective goes back to the later Obama years. In the fall of 2018, the Air Force announced a plan to grow its force structure from 312 operating squadrons, comprising all aircraft types combined, as well as the Guard and Reserve, to 386. Undoubtedly, the services have valid reasons for desiring more forces. Due to prolonged deployments, our airmen, sailors, Marines, and soldiers are frequently worn out and under stress. Additionally, we have been requesting a lot of their stuff. The consequences include the 2 devastating Navy ship crashes in 2017, increased accident rates in recent training exercises, a shortage of personnel in military specializations, like pilots, and significant readiness issues in specific equipment categories like Marine Corps helicopters. But a force that is better funded, run more effectively, and is more up to date would be the answer rather than one that is bigger. Notwithstanding its issues, the force's preparedness is stressed but not broken, and many of its core principles are strong. Thanks for watching. Kindly like and subscribe for more videos. In the comments section of the post, please tell me how many you discovered.